welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I am Stephanie Peirolo.
And I'm Eugene S. Robinson with a mouthful of supplies.
He does this. I'm like, you want to finish your bite? You have like flecks of food on
This is breakfast.
All right. This is episode 47, and it is the end of the year show. So we're going to do a wrap up. We're going to take a little break over the holidays, and we're going to do a wrap up. So although we will be back with bells on in early 2025. And what I wanted to do is, a lot of times with my executive coaching clients, they will ask me, do you have any exercises for the end of the year, right? For like wrap up planning, executives sometimes like that stuff. So,
don't lay people off. That's your number one executive piece of advice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't be a Scrooge. So here's just kind of some review questions that I will read out. I'll put it in the notes on Substack for those of you that want to access them in a written form. And then Eugene and I are going to just do our own little wrap up here. So I'll just read the questions. There's 6 of them. The first one was, what is something that went well this year, right? It's what was good. Let's start with appreciative inquiry. The second one is that, 2025 was a difficult year. There were a lot of bad things that happened. 24, sorry. Let's not project.
I got to knock on wood now.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm knocking on wood too. 2024. What is one thing that went badly that you can do something about? So the idea here is to identify, it might be personal, it might be professional, something that was difficult, challenging, unfortunate. And what did you learn from it? What are you going to try to do differently? What actions are you going to take in response to that? Because I think that if we can look at the difficult thing and take back some sort of sense of agency, it can be empowering. And then the third one is, what are you looking forward to in 2025? Right? Joy, anticipation is, it's enlivening. It also, you might be looking forward to rest. Rest counts. This doesn't have to be an additional participation in hustle culture.
Correct.
And then 4, what are 2 goals you want to accomplish in 2025? Right? Ideally, you have some plan to make that happen. 5, and these
don't include laying off people.
No, don't include don't be a bad boss, not getting featured on the Bad Boss Brief. Correct. And then these are 2 that I try to use a lot with my clients or when I'm working with leadership teams. The first one, if we're sitting here a year from now and you did not accomplish your top goals, tell me why. And I remember one time I was in a meeting with a team that was led by a very charismatic founder. And he said, here's what our goal is. Here's what's going to happen in the next year. And I asked that question. And the founder was like, what do you, of course, we're going to make the goals. And somebody else on his leadership team said, we will not make this goal because of X. And he was right. And it brought up, and of course, the founder was like, no, you're wrong. But it's ever since then, this was many, many years ago, ever since then, I've used that question, right? If we're sitting here a year from now, it didn't happen, why? And then the last one is just generally, what are we not thinking about that we should be thinking about? Right?
So fundamentally, we got ourselves a SWOT analysis, it sounds like, which I'm game for.
Yes and no. I think that the challenge with a SWOT analysis or some of the tools that are commonly used by people who do the job that I do is they can become rote. And there isn't a lot of space for people who are maybe more creative thinkers, right? So a SWOT analysis is great for somebody who thinks in quadrants, who's very linear, who likes data, right? Given that you and I are not that person.
That's why I'm smiling. Yeah.
Right. And I primarily work with people who run creative companies or are creatives themselves. These more open-ended questions often can be more evocative. And I use, again, like I said, a lot of these in teams. And so, for a leader to go to their team and say, a year from now, if we don't do this, why? If your team trusts you enough to tell you the truth, you're going to get some useful answers.
Right.
Right. Same thing with the what are we not thinking about that we should be thinking about? always useful. And again, I think these are also useful as individual questions, right? I mean, you and I aren't going to do a SWOT analysis on ourselves, but this could still be evocative. So let's do it, you and me. So what was something that went well for you this year in 2024 that was good?
The completing the purchase of my house in Spain, which I went to a Christmas party with a real estate guy on Saturday, and he misunderstood. He thought that I was about to make a purchase. So he started raising all these possible pitfalls. He's been doing real estate for, 30 years. And each one of them I could skirt around. He gave me 3. And then it dawned on me that he thought I hadn't done it yet. And then I had to let him know, no, I took full possession 3 weeks ago. So this is already, he goes, oh, did you have any trouble? I go, actually, outside of negotiating fights between the Polish interior designer and the Spanish developer, no, it was painless. And so it was really nice to have realized that I got lucky. I mean, outside of being present and, even tempered, certain amount of equanimity, it's been amazingly smooth, much smoother even than buying any of the houses I've ever bought in America. And this was a full construction from ground up. So that was a positive thing for me in 2024.
And I think my most positive thing was that I finally got a book deal.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do since the year after we graduated from college, which was 1984. And, the idea, in fact, just this morning I was meeting with my publisher and going over the marketing plan. And it's like marketing plan, like there's PR people and social media. There are people. I have people, Eugene.
My team.
Exactly, my team. And so the book comes out in the spring. We'll talk more about it as it gets closer. But I think that that is just good news, right? And exciting. But I think there's also something really validating for me because, you try to get something done creatively and then try to get it out in the world, which are two different things. Right. There's a lot of self-doubt. I mean, I write by myself. I sit here in this room and I type. And, the idea of trying to do anything for close to, 40 years. And there's a lot of self-doubt. And of course, the publishing industry has changed completely, multiple times within that span. And, there's a sort of validation of it. Like I wasn't crazy. Yep. This wasn't a mad dream. And now I get to do the thing. And I think there's also something encouraging for, people who are older. Like it's not too late, right? Yep. I still know how to write. I have more interesting things to say. So that was definitely my cool, exciting thing that happened.
I always hold on to Bukowski, who didn't hit until he was like 67. Worked terrible jobs in the post office and picking vegetables in the fields. And it reminds me of that old high school coach thing. You can't lose if you don't quit, which is it's not exactly right. You can lose a game without quitting, but in our instance, in creative endeavors, I think it's just usually always a function of time, but people break down before they get to wrangling with the clock. So.
Well, also realizing the freedom that I get because I have a day job.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I wrote a book that I wanted to write.
Right.
And I enjoyed the process of doing that. Right. So there is a certain amount of freedom. All right. So what is one thing that went badly that you could do something about? And what did you learn?
Well, on the biggest tour, I've been doing music since 1980. And not even arguably, the biggest tour that we had ever done came to a screeching halt 4 shows away from the biggest show we would have ever done. It would have been 30,000 people in Clisson, France, with Metallica playing 2 bands behind us. It would have been an amazing windfall, just from the point of view of how many T-shirts you sell or merchandise or whatever. And it was canceled because of the depredations of one of the band members and, allegations that have not been proved out or unfounded, but seem, enough to get the tour canceled. And what I learned from it is that it's a larger philosophical thing. Going back to high school coaches, you hear people say, act like you've been there before, and this was usually directed at somebody who was excessively celebrating what should be normal. I got a touchdown. You need dancing and flipping and, act like you've been there before. And I thought there are some people for whom that is cold comfort. Because I think deep down, they fundamentally don't feel like they belong or deserve to be there, despite the fact that maybe they've been playing their instrument since they were 10 and had harbored dreams of some sort of rock and roll, but to work as hard as we had worked for as long as we had worked and invested so much cash wise, that's quantifiable. To have that yanked out from under you like a Jenga blocks because of some stupid shit. I learned that if you're going to engage in creative ventures with people, you have to know where that Thanatos gene exists in your band because it will come up. And since then, I've become especially sensitive to other people's travails. And I've seen, this has been a year of bands just implosion after implosion after implosion over the stupidest shit ever. So, I think, again, I'm going to have to go with a SWOT analysis because it helps me organize my thoughts. These weaknesses, these weaknesses in the system, you need to pay attention to or be mindful of aggressively. I'm not talking about paranoia. I'm just talking about you got to know that every house has a weak point and just figure out where it is.
I think, and for those of you that don't listen to us all the time, Eugene is talking about the demise of the band Oxbow.
Yes.
We have talked about before on the show, and he's written about in a Substack. I love the idea of the Thanatos gene.
Yep.
That there are some people who are going to press that self-destruct button at the most unlikely time.
Right? I had a very successful friend, and he described it thusly. He said, Eugene, have you ever walked by that big red button and wondered what would happen if you pushed it? And that's it. Right. He pushed it and is no longer one of the most successful people I know. So he succeeded in pushing that red button, but in the long run, it didn't work out well for him. So,
well, you see that a lot with people with problems with substance abuse, right? Like the phrase that I use is you're throwing away happiness with both hands. Like you're just dismantling your life in the grip of some compulsion. So, okay. And then for me, I think the worst thing that happened politically was the election of Donald Trump, the re-election. Mm-hmm. And I think what I learned is that I had a delusion about I didn't think he was going to win. Mm-hmm. And I realized I had a delusion about the American political system, the American culture, where we are. I was wrong in my wrongness. And I'm looking at that of like, I need to reframe my narrative about the country in which I live and the political system. And, I mentioned this before, I'm trying to stay away from kind of the facile punditry that is, flooding social media and really look at, I mentioned Tressie McMillan Cottom, who's a sociologist and a tenured professor, and really taking some time with her work and her analysis as a Black woman, as an academic, as a sociologist, and understand, right? And get past those facile narratives, because I do think it's important for me and for all of us to take action, right? Yep. Like this is like, yes, I have taken a period of time to rest, to grieve, to process, but I need to take action. And figure out what that action is going to be. So that's kind of the next one there. And there is a book. There's a lawyer named Emily Amick who does a lot of online organizing, and she has a book out called Democracy in Retrograde, which I want to get and read about how we can all get involved, even if it's our local school board, and the idea of how to banish despair through action that can move us forward. Okay. What are you looking forward to in 2025?
Apropos of what you just said, leaving America. I'm really looking forward to my June move as soon as the kid finishes school. The school session ends, and I've also figured out that I can start shipping stuff early, so it's not a big, giant, crazy last moment lip. So I'll just start sending I only own books, records, and art. So clothing, half of it will stay. And so the logistics of shipping, but I'm really excited to actually be making the move to Spain. But it should be said that this is not in reaction or response to anything that happened politically in America. This has been longstanding. I've been doing this for a long time. But I did follow the words of my friend Jamie Stewart from that band Juju, who said, explaining his newly expat status, I wanted to stay ahead of disaster this time. So I have cottoned on to that, but I'm very excited about what constitutes a healthy next chapter for me, I believe.
Right.
So.
And I think for me, I'm looking forward to this new process of being a published author and what that looks like, and new skills and new things that I'm going to do. Looking forward, I think, is tempered by the idea of this is a lot of time and effort, and what if it doesn't work? There's that kind of what if this, but so I think that the unalloyed anticipation that I have for 2025 is really in the simpler, more domestic pleasures. I see my grandkids quite a bit. My grandson's about to turn 3. My granddaughter's 5. It is a particularly joyful period of time where coming to Nana's house is like going to Disneyland. I am the coolest person, and I am going to take advantage of that period of time where I am the Nana rock star. Okay. So what do you want to accomplish in 2025? Name 1 or 2 goals. And do you have a plan to make that happen?
Yeah, I have a huge list. Buñuel has 3 tours, one in February, one in April, one in May. And Buñuel is my Italian supergroup, of which I'm the only non-Italian. And the record that come out was Mansitude. So the videos with that will kick off in January, lead up to the tours. We have a major gig at the Roadburn Festival in Rotterdam, which is then surrounded by a tour, as well as tour of the States. And then after that, there'll be some kind of electronica stuff with this other project that I put out November 15th, Manjin. And I also have tried to combine, insofar as possible, every band show with a daytime book show. Because the reality of it is, and you'll realize this soon enough, that nobody is going to sell your book like you're going to sell your book. So the last show I did with Lydia Lunch, I sold, I don't know, maybe 14 books. And I know there was nobody else on the entire planet Earth who sold 14 of my memoir in that day that I was at that show, making me the #1 sales. So I take it super seriously. So, and I know it's a heavy lift, and I just, it's the one foot in front of the other thing you're well familiar with. I just got to make it to July, and then I just got to make it to August. I just gotta, and that's what I'm hoping. So it's a heavy lift for 2025. And the move to Spain also is to be accompanied by, once I get finished with all this touring, me getting to work on what I want to be my next book, which is another novel. So
let's go then directly to, if we're sitting here a year from now and you didn't accomplish that, why?
If I'm sitting here a year from now and I have not accomplished that, it's been because I've underestimated the success of the prior engagement, by which I mean we have a certain number of shows scheduled, right? It's quantifiable. It's known. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but maybe I'll say 40 shows. But inevitably what starts to happen is reviews start to follow these shows, and then you pick up more shows in more festivals. So if in other words, if your chart starts to go like this, this will. I'm not one of those people, again, to go back to Bukowski, he goes, nobody who was worth a damn ever wrote in peace. I'm not one of those people who I need peace to write. But I do need some time to write. and I can do it anywhere. I can write in the van on tour. I can write, but I also like to spend a lot of time with my family. So between, if I take Cora on the book tour, then I'm not writing, right? And then until she goes to sleep, and then I use to sleep. So it's just a matter of fitting all this stuff into a small spot. And I think a lot of that depends on kind of taking your shots when you can get them, right? Sleeping enough, so I'm getting about 6 hours of sleep a night. I can keep that up, sleeping up, writing when I'm awake, and I think I should be able to do it. I mean, I've been super productive up until now. There are 3 records coming out this year. I think that's pretty fucking productive.
Yeah, no
oh,
Well, and what I'm hoping to accomplish is, I mean, in addition to my book stuff, and maybe we can crowdsource this because there might be somebody who's listening who can help us, right? So I want us, Eugene and I, have a podcast idea about aging and specifically focused on people who are working and engaged between the ages of 55 and let's say 70, right? Because there's an idea that like everybody that's joined the AARP is 70. It's all about retirement. That's all the direct mail pieces I get are about retirement. I have no intention of retiring. I am working and working hard. And we have a podcast idea that we are trying to get somebody to actually pay us for or sponsor. And so one of my goals is that we can do that. Right. This is fun, but it's not, bringing in much revenue. And so the idea of like, could we get something that brings in more revenue, but we're still doing this. And then
fundamentally, we're all looking for lines that go up like this versus the line that goes down. So yes.
Yeah. And so, and if we're sitting here a year from now and it didn't happen, I think that there's, one of the reasons is actually ageism, right? Like I frequently will pitch freelance articles about being a woman in her 60s in advertising or challenges that my older women clients have faced, just generally, not specifically about my clients, because I don't talk about my clients' experiences, but just generally, right? What is it like to be a woman in her 50s? Because there are none of us in our 60s in advertising, and I can't get them published. Even with publications that have published me before.
Well, I think, even at publications that are likely to publish that type of material, and that's what I find interesting. It's not like you're taking that to Field and Stream, right?
Exactly.
You're not taking it to Popular Mechanics, which you would expect a rejection from. These are people who should be interested, but are choosing to not be, and that's mind blowing in a certain way.
Yeah, and so that I think would be one of the things that could be an impediment there. And then, is there anything?
But you know what? But there's a thing that I'm also reading. Like the guy who's our guy at Alta Magazine, Matt Haber, put up something that somebody had written for Alta about the whiteness of editorial boards and And I'm like, not just editorial, man. What are advertising? What are we talking about? So it's like, there is. It reminds me of the comedian once said about the surveyor who sets up in the middle of the street his tripod and tries to figure out why traffic is bad. All of these publications try to figure out how come we can't get more minority involvement, huh? Let me show you the drawer of rejection letters that I maintain to this day because I'm a bitter, spiteful guy.
And it's the same thing. I mean, Eugene and I have done live events about Bad Boss Brief. We have this podcast. We are pitching another podcast. It's like 62-year-old white woman, 62-year-old black guy. We have some things to say. We are both writers. And yet, crickets.
It's okay. Listen, it's not the fault of the people who listen that other people aren't. But you have to know this. What did I just say earlier? I go, if you don't quit, you can't lose.
Yeah, there's that. All right. So what are we not thinking about that we should be?
World War III, which I'm not even Jamie Dimon, whether it's to distract from his subterranean support of Kamala Harris or whether it's just for whatever reason, they have game theoried out the possibility of China, Iran, and Russia who are already working together, come to some sort of global and the projections are horrible. And he's making also as a banker, making suggestions about what you should do with your money and where you should put it. And I stopped reading when he got to crypto, but before that, commercial real estate or real estate seems to be, to own something that you could hold on to seemed to be the move. And what he was saying is, don't keep your shit liquid because things are going to change aggressively. So I think that's what I am globally now, thinking globally. That's what I'm concerned with. I don't buy the total doom and gloom scenario.
Excuse me. That sounds pretty doom and gloom.
Total financial collapse does sound pretty doom and gloom, but it's like when there's an earthquake and then all of a sudden people are in the streets and the homeless people are like, what? What? I mean, it's been doom and gloom for some of us for quite a while. So if it happens for everybody, then I'm like, well, welcome to the club, But I don't know. I'm trying not to be a nattering nabob of negativity, and I think things in general are going to be okay.
So what I think is on a smaller scale, I think what we're not thinking about that we should be is the impact of social media. And again, I talk about this. I need to be on social media. But, there's the government is considering shutting down TikTok in the United States because unless ByteDance divests from, Chinese ownership. And what I think is interesting is that while there is support for that, and there's certainly a lot of political conversation, there doesn't seem to be a political conversation or an awareness that the very data that the government is concerned that China is going to access, and the influence and the opportunity for misinformation that are inherent in TikTok as a social media platform is equally present, if not more so, in Zuckerberg's platform, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, and then X. Right? And blue skies, nefariousness, TBD, right? But it's a huge, significant problem in terms of misinformation, in terms of, all of these things. And I think that we as a society are missing the risk that is inherent, right? I mean, it's like we're not looking at the fact that manipulating information and scraping intimate data and using that against people is the business model. And that's too much power for Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg to have.
That's viable. I guess that's pretty doom and gloom.
It's pretty doom and gloom.
That's pretty doom and gloomy. Yeah. Okay.
I know. So we maybe should have started more on the, appreciative thing. But let's go to a fire me before we wrap up for the year.
This is much less a fiery, but much more an amusing statement. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on before that you had talked about was, about how upsetting politically 2024 was. And you're going to make certain changes. And I said, well, the changes I made fairly early because I'm surrounded by, and at least in one of my endeavors, a bunch of MAGA guys, right, at jiu-jitsu. And so I wasn't as surprised. I was reading the room, listening to, how they were, their exaltation when he beat back this assassination attempt, and their dread when, when he got convicted, or his bad performance with Kamala in the first and only debate. So my take is been sort of measured. But it was funny. One of the guys is a Google guy, and the stock market has been going crazy, right? I think it was 13% for Google, which is substantial. I mean, this guy is walking away with probably $980,000 this year. This guy got his degree from an online university. Never ever thought he would see this kind of money in his life. And I said, well, man, I'm really happy for you. Thank God for that Biden economy. And he's like, Biden economy? I go, what else would you call it? He goes, well, it's going up because people know that Trump's coming in. And somebody else said, yeah. So Trump gets all the credit, Biden gets all the blame. You can't win with these guys. And I go, yeah, precisely. So it's nice to see. It is nice to see that the lunacy continues, that they're just not what they've said, this blanket systematic denial of the reality of experience, that no matter what bad news came out about Trump, it was all manufactured. It's interesting to see it work the other way, where you can't allow. It's like really a weird zero-sum game, and it's just that's not comfortably how you play with people that you want to continue living with. So I guess that's still doom and gloom.
Well, I think it is an interesting point, this notion that, the truth is fungible. Right. And, there was a story in the Seattle Times today about, and I don't have it in front of me, but there was a north of Seattle, there is a school district that knows they can't collect this data, but they know that they have a number of kids whose families are undocumented. And with Trump talking about deportation, so this school district got together with the Mexican consulate and said, we're going to have an information session where you can learn about your rights. Like, for example, if ICE comes to the door, you don't have to let them in if they don't have a warrant, right? Yep. And you can also learn, what support is available if you are from Mexico, from the Mexican consulate, so that children of these families, this is like young children, right? Yep. Can have some information. And a TikTok account that's run by, I think it's like the Owning the Libs kind of a TikTok account, started spreading so much misinformation that they had to cancel the event because they did not feel it would be safe. People were going to show up in protest. They were suggesting that there would be raids with the assumption that anyone who attended that would be undocumented. And what was interesting in reading this, there was, this particular TikTok voice was saying that undocumented immigrants are getting free housing, free healthcare, money, food, and all paid for by the American taxpayer. That is false, right? Yeah. People who do not have a Social Security card pay taxes. Right. Yeah. And they don't ever see the benefit of that taxes. Right. Yeah. I live in Seattle. Nobody is getting, there's very little affordable housing. Nobody's getting the food. So like, it was just patently false. But that narrative on that platform was able to mobilize so many people with threats of violence, threats of raids, that they had to cancel something that was actually beneficial and useful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I do think it is, some, even though, yes, it's grim. I think there is something to be said for naming truth as truth to people who will hear it consistently, and at least owning it in your own self. Right. I mean, like
the imitator Dana Carvey did of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Hear me now and believe me later. It's kind of how it shapes up. So.
Exactly. But I think also, one of the things that I'm trying to do is to be aware of the challenges, name them, grieve them, but then also really be assiduous about the joy that's in my life.
Yep.
Right. Like really pay attention to, whether it's your family or being out in nature or pets or, some fantasy novel about dragons, whatever it is, if there is something that brings you peace, that brings you solace, that takes you back to that positivity, because it is important to stay realistic and stay motivated, but you also want to lean into things that bring you joy, that bring you life, because that's what's going to give you the energy to keep going. And 2025 might be a bit of a slog.
It might be. Let's be positive. And that's what I was telling Cora. I said, we got to be positive.
Yes. And I do want to end with just a thank you to the people who listen to our podcast, who support it, who tell other people about it, who write into us, which, by the way, if you want to write into us for something for us to do in the new year, WTF@badbossbrief.com. But we appreciate you all.
Yep.
Okay. That's all we got. Thank you. Bye.
Adios.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting consigliera.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleek 3, that's number 3, on Instagram. Reach out with your questions, concerns, worst case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. We personally answer every submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for episodes of Bad Boss Brief so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.